Welcome to the Proud to be Profane Podcast, where we're not afraid to drop a few F-bombs, make some dirty jokes, or pee on the all-seeing pyramid of Illuminati enlightenment. And now, here's your host, Mr. Michael Joseph. Welcome to the Proud to be Profane Podcast.
We are on episode number 8, which marks the journey into strange times because there was a lot of censorship going on the YouTubes, and I'm going to try to be like Neo in the Matrix and dodge some of these bullets coming at us, hopefully successfully. So starting now, we won't be posting any of the episodes on YouTube anymore, just a video letting you know that they exist. And it's a good time to start doing that because today is one of the first discussions that goes into some more controversial issues surrounding world events, terror events, shooting events. We don't go into anything too extensive as to the details, but just the general philosophy about dealing with such events and analyzing them and just simply questioning them. Questioning narratives, questioning backgrounds, wondering, is this exactly as the witnesses and mainstream media tell us it is, or is there some fuckery going on? I'm going to assume that you think that there's some fuckery going on, otherwise you probably wouldn't be listening. So this episode is very saturnine, and I guess it's fitting with me and Mike both being Capricorns who are going to point out a lot of things that might seem to be downers to people, but we think it's just kind of the reality of the situation. The things that you kind of have to deal with and address at the core before you go all Jupiterian, expanding and having all these hopes and dreams. Nothing wrong with hopes and dreams, but to make them a reality and bring them into a Saturnian form or construct, you got to do it right at the start. Otherwise, the Saturn cycle of reaping and sowing will just fuck you over, karma gets returned, and you get to start all over from the beginning anyways. So you might as well do it right at the start, or at least be mindful of it and do your best to build up that correct foundation so you don't end up like the Tower card in tarot. So Mike and I might seem like the Debbie Downers, but we're doing it because we love you, and we're just trying to be honest about things. So we might be wrong, we might be right, who knows? We'll let you decide that. So let's get to it with Mr. Mike Williams. All right, Mike, welcome to the new podcast, and we're trading roles here. I've done that with a few people so far, so we'll see how it goes. But today I wanted to talk to you about censorship because this is something that has affected your channel recently and a lot of other social media platforms, but more specifically YouTube. So you've been hit with a strike for, a more controversial discussion with Ole Damagard, and this is part of what seems to be a greater movement to censor alternative media channels, and especially when content is related to questioning, school shootings or terror events, as the media likes to call them. And I've been looking up, all this kind of truther stuff since roughly around 2013. And back then, it seemed like the only way you get things taken out is if you violate a copyright strike, if you use a news clip that you weren't supposed to or something like that, or that's how they would try to get you. But now it's transitioned into like bullying, hate speech, and then this very broad category of violating community guidelines. So my question is, what was your particular strike for, and have you had any other trouble on other platforms outside of YouTube, such as Facebook?
I've had some issues with Facebook, Michael, and thank you so much for having me on the show to talk about this, because it is important that we do discuss what's going on, because there is censorship taking place. I've had problems with Facebook where I have a page called The Sage of Quay, and I have something like 800 and something subscribers on that page. And twice over the last, I would say, 7 to 8 months, Facebook went in and unsubscribed about 90% of those people. And so I had to go back in and re-invite people to get them back to the page, and they didn't even realize that they were unsubscribed. So in that case, it would be Facebook uses likes versus subscribe.
Mm-hmm.
So they're liking and following that page. So they dropped a bunch of people, and I had to go back in. And of course, people will find you again because they're not getting the feeds anymore. But they did that to me twice. So they did it the first time, and I went back in and re-invited a bunch of folks. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, they did it again to me. And so I went through the same process of trying to rebuild the page. Nothing like that has happened since, but I do occasionally get the dialogue boxes from Facebook where they say that the link that I'm trying to post, which is a link from my blog as an example, Blogger, so it's not some strange entity on the internet, they'll call it spam. So, it's the little things that they do, the annoying things, the things that it makes it impossible for you to actually finger them for doing what they're doing. Common sense obviously says that they're screwing with you, but they do it in ways that, it makes it very difficult for you to point at them and say, this is what you're doing, and I know you're doing it, and you better stop. I also have issues with Blogger, which is owned by Google, which also owns YouTube. Occasionally, what Blogger will do is they will turn the spigot off to my audience out in Europe. I have a very large following in France and the UK. This is my blog I'm talking about. And I've had on a number of occasions where all of a sudden the analytics and the viewership from Europe, specifically, as I mentioned before, France and the UK, basically disappears. I get some views, but not to the degree where I was at. And then they turn it back on. So they screw with it by turning it off, and then they let that ride for a while. So your overall views decline. And then, they wait a couple of days or a week or so, and then they turn it back on and everything comes back to where it was. Now, this is an ongoing issue with Blogger that I've experienced. It doesn't happen on specific intervals. It's, I guess, whenever they decide that they're going to fuck with me. And then there was the YouTube thing, and that's, what we're going to talk about today.
Do you think it's more like you post something that might be more current event and then they restrict things, and then kind of once that event is out of the spotlight, maybe they'll bring it back? Is that what you're trying to say with some of these things? Or
I think so. I think with Europe, there were two things. One is I will post articles and videos that have to do with Zionism.
Mm-hmm.
And they certainly don't like any information going to Europe that has to do with Israel, the Zionists, and the Jews. And because in many countries in Europe, it's a thought crime to contradict anything that has to do with the Holocaust, as an example. So I think when I post material like that, I don't want to say they get nervous. They don't get nervous. They basically just shut it off because they don't want that information going out there. They don't want people to hear information that they don't want them to hear. They want them to just believe and to kowtow to whatever the mainstream storyline is, whether it's a current event or even a historic event.
Yeah,
and also with I found that with the stuff that was going on in Europe, like the people being run over by trucks, and I've had those shows with Oli. So whenever they had one of those events where people were killed because a truck plowed through a bunch of people and all of that, I found that was a moment in time also when they would pull back the viewership or limit the blog's exposure or reach into Europe.
Yeah, and especially that Europe is dealing with the mass immigration a lot more than we are. I've been a fan of Red Ace Radio for a long time, and then they kind of went in this extreme alt-right direction, and I totally understand why they did it. I can't really go as far as they go with it, but you can see that them doing that is a response to a lot of these things, because I know that Heinrich is based out of Sweden, and he's kind of talking about everything going on there. So the censorship in Europe, I can see that being more intense. So that's interesting that it crosses over into you having, your platform on American soil. But So what did you get the strike for with Oli? What were you guys talking about on that video?
Well, we were talking about these staged events in general and Oli's research overall. And we talked about Florida, but we didn't talk the whole show about Florida. And so it was very interesting to me because Oli and I have had this discussion many times before where he explains that it is a template. So when they go about these events, and it is a template, if you put your thinking cap on and you take a look at how these things roll out, you can call the next shot. You just know what they're going to do next, what they're going to say, how this is going to be presented. There's going to be a vigil. It's going to be Boston strong, Florida strong, everybody's strong. So that's what we talked about. And it's interesting because neither Oli nor I ever make claims like nobody died. We don't do that. And the reason why I don't do it and the reason why Oli doesn't do it is because we weren't there and we really don't know at the end of the day. The discussion that Oli and I were having was not a discussion where we were digging in and just trashing the whole Florida deal, because we were talking more in terms of their template and their process. And we didn't make any statements that said, hey, nobody died. I did ask Oli. I said, now, Oli, with this event, because I know that listeners are wondering and they're asking the question, did anybody die? And Oli said, Mike, that's a question that always gets asked, and I don't know. I can tell you that the way it's being rolled out and based upon his research, he questions whether people actually died, but he doesn't say nobody died. So YouTube to turn around and say that it violated community guidelines, which I have it in front of me here. And I'll just read it to the audience, Michael, if you don't mind.
Sure,
so
I was going to actually read it, so go ahead. You do it.
Yeah, so this way they can see how ridiculous this is. And then I'll get back to why I don't go out there and scream and yell from the rooftops that nobody died in these events. But YouTube said that I violated their community guidelines, and YouTube is not a platform for things like predatory behavior. There's nothing predatory about my shows ever. Stalking, that's ridiculous. Threats, there's absolutely no threats. Harassment, there's no harassment. Bullying or intimidation. So that's how they frame it. So you're going to get a community guideline strike if they deem your material to be predatory, stalking, making threats, harassing, bullying, or intimidating. And you've been on my show a number of times, and you know that it's a discussion-based show where we talk about the guests, we talk about the research, and we talk about their insights, and we get the perspectives of the research or the person who's doing investigation, and we do it in a very civil, adult-like manner. So, they hit me with the strike. I appealed it immediately, and the appeal process, folks, basically consists of you clicking a link that says appeal, and you go in there and you get the pleasure of having to explain why you shouldn't have received the strike in about 250 characters or less. So you really don't have an ability to appeal. And within 24 hours, Michael, they declined the appeal. And they said, no, the decision that we made stands, which says to me that, the show was like an hour and 45 minutes. Nobody listened to that show.
Exactly.
Yeah, they didn't listen to it. They basically just saw the appeal, got a laugh, because I'm sure they're laughing their asses off with what they're doing to the community, thinking it's all fun and games.
Or it was just some bot,
Oh yes, or it could have been a bot. But I think that honestly, I think the way this is working is, number one, I think Oli is being blackballed. So they're not going to strike down all of Oli's shows because, like I said, the way they do this, it's very sneaky. They try to do it under the radar. So some of the shows where Oli will talk about this stuff, they will leave them up. And then there's other shows where they will take them down. And I think that what they do is they take the shows down where the conversation is too intelligent. It makes too much sense. And I'm not saying that there's others that have spoken to Ole didn't make any sense, but I think that they have us on a radar. Okay, there's certain people within the community, the alternative research community, and the truth community that is clearly on their radar. And so I think that they spin the wheel and they say, well, okay, well, it's Mike's turn now, so we're going to take a shot at the Sage of Quay. I also believe that their algorithms have our names in it. So they're looking for search term Sage of Quay, Mike Williams, Michael Joseph, Ole Damagard, Sophia Smallstorm, and so on. And I think that that's part of, the way they go about seeking out these shows. So, but anyway, what's going on is clearly censorship. It's over the top censorship because they're accusing content providers of putting content out that is predatory, stalking, threats, harassment, bullying, and intimidation. And that's the furthest thing.
And that's what they're doing. They're
exactly
engaging in predatory behavior and bullying and intimidation.
Exactly.
Based on like what you said, there's a difference between questioning the stories of people who are giving testimony about these events. And if you don't believe it, that's your fucking right to do so.
Right.
That's way different than saying, this guy's a crisis actor, this guy's whatever, 100%, blah, 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 blah. I mean, to me, people who do that, you're playing with fire in a way. But at the same time, at this point now, like you said, when you're trying to be more objective about it and kind of take that middle path with it, now that's what kind of scared me about you having your channel struck. Because I'm like, oh, I know how Mike handles these things. And so that kind of made me rethink how I go about things in the future. And I'm actually, this talk we're doing now, I'm not putting it on YouTube. I'm going to do a little thing to tell people where to find it because I can't afford to have everything taken down at this point in time because that's where I have everything,
Right. That's exactly what I'm going to do, Michael. I'm just going to put a trailer up on YouTube and I'm going to say, if you want to listen to this show with Michael Joseph, click the link and I'll take you to DTube and you can take a listen to it.
Mm-hmm. Have you talked to Ole about this? Do you know what his thoughts are on, the idea of like having a target on his back and perhaps being sort of a threat to other people's shows? And is he finding it more difficult, if you have talked to him, to get invited on podcasts? Because he's one of these guys that just focuses, that's his main focus, is all of these big events and questioning them, the template
right.
of them.
I haven't spoken to Ole. He's traveling and he's doing research as we speak. And I think he's out in Asia Pacific doing his work. But I did send him an email and a copy of a link to the response I had to my subscribers and my Facebook folks about what happened to the show. So he is aware of the fact that the show got pulled. There's no doubt about it. And I'm sure Ole, Ole's a smart guy, that he's also aware that he does have a bullseye on his back. So, but I haven't had a chance to actually sit with him one-on-one to talk about it. I'm sure if I did, he would say, I know, Mike, I know, but I have to keep going. I do want to mention one thing, Michael. So just to cover this, I want to circle back just a little. The reason why I don't take a position with regard to whether people died or didn't die at these events, I can have a premise or a position that I think that perhaps nobody died and it was completely staged. It was a quote unquote hoax. But the reason why I don't go there is because there are clearly events where people died. So two examples that I use a lot would be 9/11, right? So 9/11 was an orchestrated, staged event. It's the official story is a fairy tale. It didn't happen that way, and people died. We can go back to the Oklahoma City building and the Mora building. That also is a fairy tale because the explosions, the bombs that did all the damage and killed people were bombs that were inside the building, not the McVeigh truck that blew up outside, but people died in Oklahoma City as well. And I'd like to remind people that the people who are pulling these things off, I call them the controllers, that they don't think twice about creating reasons to have conflict and to go to war and then sign your kids up to go fight their wars. And of course, people die in war. So I don't think it is prudent to take a position and be adamant about the fact that nobody died. The reason is because we weren't there and we really don't know at the end of the day. We could take a look at what's being presented to us and we could say, you know what? This looks very sketchy and I'm questioning whether anybody died. But the point I have been on is that we really should get off that line of debate, because I think at the end of the day, they want us to have that debate in the truth community, because this way we're throwing rocks back and forth at each other, debating whether somebody died or somebody didn't die. What we really should be focused on is understanding that these events, whether people die or not, are engineered and orchestrated, and then take it to the next level, which is who is orchestrating them and who is engineering them. That's where we really need to go with this. So I think they really want that debate, did somebody die or not die, because it keeps a lot of people who would do research and investigate from taking the next step and digging deeper. So in a weird way, they want us to have that debate. But if you yell too loud about people not dying and they're all crisis actors, then YouTube is going to shoot holes in your ship. So it's kind of interesting the way they're playing this thing. You know, that's it's not as black and white as I think that some people would like it to be.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's why I've always been the same way, because if you're trying to quote unquote wake people up to some of these things and you make a wrong call about it and you're a big voice in it, and you kind of have two options. Either you backpedal and say you were wrong, but at the same time, all those other videos where you spoke so boldly about nobody dying, that's going to be a big turnoff to people who might be starting to look into these things. Or you can just stick to your own narrative of that and just stay on it. You know what I mean? Because like in some weird way, you can't prove things to the extent that most people would want them to be proven in like any of these events. Cause you know, unless any of us were actually there and we had like some secret footage of seeing a guy get up after he was on the ground after a photo shoot and walking away. You know what I mean? Like this is kind of my issue with the truther community as a whole. And I understand how it's easy to fall into this trap, but to realize when you don't know, and I think very often we don't know more than we care to admit. And I think that that's kind of our nature. We want to know, you know what I mean? We want to know the exact truth about this or that. And it becomes this obsession. And then sometimes people want to know so badly that they just sort of finalize on a viewpoint, and there it is. And I think you could probably draw those parallels to a lot of religious beliefs. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, I figured it out. You know, this is that, and that's the way it is. This is the correct viewpoint. But when people start pointing things out that might contradict that, you can either cling to that and become hostile, or you have to admit something that's going to be hard because it's going to retroact a lot of other things that you've said. So it's a very strange area. And like you just said, I think that this should be kind of a message to people with all of this, trying to move forward in a much more objective and reserved manner before people get all gung-ho about these things. But unfortunately, in this truther world, it's very anxiety inducing just looking at this stuff. And so your emotions run high and you get angry about something. And even if you have the thought pop into your head that that person's full of shit, they're an actor or something like that, sometimes people, it's easy for them to just run with it. Oh, I'm mad about this. I make a quick video and they just go off on it. You know what I mean? It's very impulsive sometimes. So it's a tough world, but I think with all this crap happening with YouTube right now, it's forcing people to re-examine how they do things. I know it's re-examining for me how I do things, but moving on, who else have you noticed besides Oli and yourself that have been struggling with these censorship issues that you either know personally or just channels that you know about or follow? And are there any that are particularly surprising to you? Like I said, yours was surprising to me, and that's the whole reason that I wanted to talk to you sooner rather than later.
Well, I mean, there are other channels that have been struggling, have been receiving strikes, even if they weren't flattened, taken off of YouTube. They have been put in a position where they have to be very, very careful about what it is they put up. And that's another part of the PSYOP, which is to get people who are content providers in the truth community and the alternative research community to self-censor themselves. All right, well, I better not put that up, because if I put that up, I could lose my whole channel. That's why, Michael, I had put my response video up and said that if I lose the channel, I lose the channel. I'm going to go down with the ship. because I am not going to kowtow to YouTube and this very, very blatant attempt to squash free thinking and critical thinking. And I'll answer your question in a second. I just want to circle back again. I just want to let people know that I think it's a mistake to believe that they would not orchestrate or stage events where people die. All we need to do is to point back to Gladio in Europe with the state-sponsored terrorism that was admitted to that took place. So we have to keep that in mind, and I think it's more important that we dissect their process. That's what I think is more important, that we understand that there are patterns and there is a template, as I mentioned before, and as Oli speaks about all the time. That's what's more important, because once you understand the patterns, then you are in a better position to assess whether this is real or not. Now, going back to channels, that's a tough question, because there are some channels that I would, quote unquote, follow. I don't follow any particular channel as a diehard fan. I have a bunch of channels that I subscribe to. And then in the morning, what I do is, just to explain my process, I put 10 new blog posts up a day. So I get a feed in my YouTube feed of those folks that I've subscribed to. And then I scan their material to take a look and see if there's something there that I think would be of interest to my audience. There are some channels that left that I suspected, that they would somehow wind up in some trouble because of the way they approach things. Very bombastic, sensationalizing a particular topic. As you mentioned, going, balls to the wall, declaring that nobody died, this whole thing is fake. When you go, in that direction, I think that you increase the odds tremendously that you're going to wind up without a YouTube channel at some point. But I was surprised at a channel, as an example, and I think Crow 777's back now. In fact, I know he's back. I took a look and I see that he's got a channel back up on YouTube. But, they were going after Crow. That was a surprise to me, because Crow's material is very similar to you and I, where we like to bring an even keel approach to discuss a situation or to discuss a topic in a way where there is pros and cons being introduced into the dialogue and the discussion. So when they were going after Crow, I was very surprised about that. And that was my first red flag that I could wind up in the same boat, because the way he approaches his shows was very similar in the way that I approach my shows. I mean, we have different topics, of course, but it was the way we go about it. There were other shows that Jamie Lee's A Plain Truth. Jamie does a lot of hard-hitting types of stuff, boots on the ground reporting and investigating. As an example, he was down in Texas with Hurricane Harvey, and also with the fires out in California, and they're constantly giving him a problem. I think they shot both of his channels. He had the first one that was taken down. He created a backup channel that was taken down, and now he's back up with another channel with a different name. Another channel would be In Truth by Grace. I know she's got another channel up again, but her other channels were also targeted because of some of the stuff that she was talking about. Some of the ones that surprised me, I guess, would be the Richie Allen Show is another one. Richie was taken off YouTube also, and I was surprised about that because I never really looked at Richie's show as very controversial.
Yeah, I never listened to his show, but I've heard of him. What kind of stuff did he talk about?
He would talk about current events and stuff like that. He would talk about conspiracy stuff, chemtrails, geoengineering, mind control, and stuff like that. The types of stuff that I've talked about on mine. But Richie's show, and Richie, if you're listening to this, don't take offense. Richie's show was, in my view, more topical in the sense that there wasn't this digging deep into stuff. It was more informative from the standpoint of people maybe that were just getting into this alternative research stuff or this truth material, or maybe they progressed a certain level into it. I'm not saying it's bad. It's good. It had its purpose. But when I was told that Richie lost his channel, I was very surprised by that. So And I don't know why. I mean, I don't know what the situation was, who the guest was, or what guests or shows that they targeted for what reasons. I don't know, but I was surprised by that because I never really looked at Richie's show as something that would be controversial in a sense. Another channel that I like was taken down was The Black Child. He does terrific work in breaking down the occult symbolism and the whole Masonic aspect of entertainment and celebrities and all of that, and other stuff that he does. He's even covered, some of these other events. He staged events that you and I are talking about right now, and they took his channel down. And then he came up with another channel called The Black Matrix, I think it's called. How long is that going to stay up? Because in order for you to stay up, you really have to change what it is you're presenting. There are certain things that you cannot talk about. And so you have to make a decision as a content provider. Do you just stop talking about that stuff? And then compromise, in my view, that's compromising my principle. So I'm not going to do that. But others, and I'm not knocking them for this, they may decide, okay, well, I have to just change it up a little bit. Because for some of these folks, and again, I'm not knocking anybody, but they have monetized channels. And if you're going to monetize and you want to make some money at this, then you're going to have to play ball to a certain degree because you're playing in the devil's sandbox. Yeah, right? So if you're on their platform and you do agree to terms and conditions, even though maybe we could talk about that a little bit, how that's become very, very twisted. There's some of these folks that are making money off their channels and they have 100,000 subscribers or 150,000 subscribers, 200,000. They don't want to lose that revenue flow. So they're going to have to make some decisions. And some of them, I'm going to assume, are going to make concessions and they're going to pull back. My channel was never monetized, so I didn't give a shit. And of course, I have over 215 shows up there over 4 years, but I wasn't making any money and it wasn't a revenue stream for me. So my attitude is all of my shows are backed up. I have them on 2 hard drives, external drives, so the shows are all there. And I will just upload them someplace else to make sure that they're out there. But I wasn't going to cry in my beer about the fact that, I'm going to lose this revenue because they've demonetized my content.
Yeah, and that was like the first wave, was demonetization was happening a lot, maybe like a year ago, I think. A lot of people, it was kind of random. There were like, there was like the Christian camp that was having problems with it because all of a sudden, talking about religious stuff became demonetized. But that wasn't the only thing. It was a lot of other content. I don't know if Crow 777, he was monetizing or not. I think he said he had a bunch of issues with that. But that was like the first wave. And now we're on another level of it where shit's just getting taken out. And I was like you, where I'm like, I don't care about monetizing on here. I didn't really see a reason for me to anyways, because I knew that everything that I do was never going to be that big, But I don't have a problem with people monetizing stuff, but I think that there's better ways to go about it that have more longevity, especially if you're going to like border into these fringe topics.
Yeah.
And, maybe that's something that we can get into a little bit later, but yeah. And for me, I thought it was interesting how a lot of videos that are going back a long time are creating problems. Like the Higher Side Chats, Greg Carlwood had an intro in a couple of the newer episodes saying that Sophia Smallstorm interview he did was on Sandy Hook. That must have been many years ago.
Yep. That
was taken out. You figure they would have went for a newer one. I think Oli's been on his show several times, but I kind of wonder because what we were talking about also is like the people who are able to make more level-headed content or analysis of some of these events. Like I wanted to mention this. I actually just did a post on Steam It because I wonder how many people coming into this now remember documentaries like We Need to Talk About Sandy Hook or Sophia Smallstorm's presentation on dissecting it in the dimensions.
Right.
Those were really good. That was like, it's kind of like, I'm kind of saying this tongue in cheek, it's like, those like the golden days of being a truther when like these great documentaries are coming out that were really well done, that had all of this information. And if I was going to show something to somebody who wasn't into any of this, but they were at least interested in looking, I would have shown them We Need to Talk About Sandy Hook, because that one doesn't jump to any conclusions or anything like that. But the guy who was involved, that Peter Klein, I've actually talked with him on the phone before. He helped promote my channel a little while back. I kind of randomly started talking with him. His channel got taken out, and he had a lot of controversial stuff like questioning the Tate murders authenticity and whatnot. And I don't know, it's frustrating because I feel like now, because there's so many things going on, there's just all these small analysis or whatever, it's kind of hard to put together a well-made documentary like that now, because I feel like everything is just way more crazy than it was before, and it's hard to keep up with everything. But I don't know, the Higher Side Chats thing kind of surprised me. And then the other thing was some of the alt-right channels that probably believe that, you know, they would never suggest that there were probably fake actors or anything on any of these events. Thinking about the guy Sargon of Akkad, he seems like the kind of person that wouldn't go there, but he had some problems with his channel, and he's just basically calling out social justice warriors. You know what I mean? I think he's like an atheist kind of person. He's not really in the world of the truther movement like we are, but, you know, just that sort of conservative alt-right perspective has had people having things taken down. And you wonder, do they have like a team of social justice warriors flagging people going out there? I don't know, but that was one of the ones that was kind of surprising for me. It's not like I listened to him a lot, but I heard him a few times, and I can agree with him on all that stuff. You know, I can't stand that social justice rhetoric when it's in that extreme form.
They are going after a number of things, Michael. We have to understand that back in 2012, the United States government, the Congress passed a law which said that the United States can apply propaganda to the American people. That used to be illegal. They could apply their propaganda outside the United States, but within the United States, it was illegal to do so. And then 2012, that was reversed. And so what we've seen since 2012 is propaganda. That's what we see. And so anybody or any group of people that put a documentary together or do podcasts that dissect the propaganda and question it, those people are going to be targeted. And that's what I'm kind of seeing. I'm seeing, I try to discern, okay, so what's propaganda out there that's being put out? These events, like these school shootings and the such, these are staged, these are orchestrated, they're engineered. And the reason why I say that is because there's no way that every single time we have one of these, that, you know, some 16, 17, or 18-year-old kid dressed in body armor, got all these weapons, drove to
who's
the school.
A little shrimp physically, couldn't actually handle it.
Exactly. And this recent one in Florida, I mean, he went there in an Uber. I mean, what was he, decked out in his body armor, and he had his bag of guns with him, and the guy driving the car didn't blink. Mm-hmm. So it's just stuff like that. You know, it just doesn't add up. So if you're questioning those types of things, you're questioning the propaganda, and dissent is not going to be allowed, because they're steering this country in a very, very specific direction. It's a direction where you don't question anything. You get in there with the rest of the pack and you run with the pack. Don't you run ahead of the pack. You get in there and you stay with the pack. They don't want critical thinking. They don't want free thinking. They don't want people to question things. If you're putting material forward, like you mentioned, the documentaries that Sophia did on Sandy Hook and others, even the ones that were done on 9/11, they don't want that stuff out there. Something that's going to help people to connect the dots, to wake them up from their slumber. They're just not going to allow that. And that's very different than content providers that are just blaring stuff out there and shouting things out there and sensationalizing, almost like, you know, National Enquirer types of stuff. I mean, there's an audience for that. I call that conspiratainment. There's going to be an audience for that. And there's going to be people that are not going to listen to that because it's just too loud and it's just too in your face. But I think that they're really now digging into shows where the guests and the hosts are talking about an event and stepping through the logic and the reasoning and the anomalies and questioning and asking questions about, why would this work that way? Why would this happen this way? And not making any judgments, but just logically walking through the process, just processing through it. And I think that that's the stage they're in right now. I think a lot of the loud stuff, they have been scrubbing that for a while. They were hitting those people with copyright infringements. That was the first wave, copyrights, right? Mm-hmm. Then, like as you mentioned, it was demonetization, and that was the low-hanging fruit stuff. And then we still have this other group out there that are doing more analysis type of work and stepping through things in a very prudent, diligent way and presenting situations or scenarios to the audience, but they're not using copyrighted material. They may not have their channels monetized. So what are we going to do about those folks? And I put myself in that kind of that package, that arena. Crow is the same way. And there's many others. I'm not just talking about the two of us, but and yourself. So there's more of this kind of thinking man's approach to how do we get the information out to the audience, and they're not liking that. So now, I mean, like I said, they went from copyright infringement to demonetization, and now we've run out of reasons, so we're just going to just take your channel down, and we're not even going to hide behind any real reason. We're going to, even the reasons that we're going to state are going to be so ridiculous, like we talked about before, predatory behavior, threats, harassment, bullying, and so on. You're not doing that, I'm not doing that, Crow's not doing that, and many others are not doing that. It's not even on our radar in our thought process to present that way.
And it's like double speak, they're like, oh, we want freedom of speech, but there's this that doesn't fall into that category, the harassment, bullying, and,
right,
conspiracy theories that are dangerous, and I can't stand the hypocrisy of it, when people, like, let's say somebody who's like perhaps very much on that left side of things, that's kind of like in that social justice mindset. I have no problem with them having any of those opinions as long as they allow me to have my opinions, and right. I will respect them if they're cool with, and like, I'm not saying I'm an alt-right person, but them having their whatever that they're going to say about it. If there's somebody who can say, hey, you can do that, that's fine, great. But I've noticed that there's a pattern that a majority of the people, I mean, I know we're talking about the polarities here, but it's just kind of something you have to do at times, where a lot of the ones that would fall into that left category are the ones that don't want the right to even have a voice. And that, to me, is indicative of a lot of the channels that are being taken out on the quote-unquote alt-right. Whereas I noticed that more people on the alt-right, they don't care if the left has their opinions that they completely disagree with. Like, that's the difference. If you allow the other side to have that opinion and express it, and hey, you can be on this YouTube platform with me, and we can both be saying the exact opposite things, but we're acknowledging that we're allowed to do that. That's really the key issue to me here. And it's that, well, the alt-right's extreme opinion cannot even be considered because Russian bots have manipulated us into thinking that they're legitimate, apparently.
Yeah.
Like, that's a conspiracy theory right there. You know what I mean? Like, so that whole viewpoint from that left perspective, they're actually the ones promoting conspiracy theories, and so it's just this weird thing where it's like, do as I say, not as I do. And again, I don't care what your opinion is. You can believe that the Easter Bunny created the world in a giant egg and it hatched, and if you don't bow down and worship it, you're going to burn in fiery hell. I think that's an insane belief, but go ahead and believe it. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like, and this is my problem with most of this. It's like saying that this particular, you're trying to say, oh, we have free speech, but, and it's kind of like the double standard that people get brainwashed into thinking is okay in certain instances. And I think that that's kind of the heart of the problem with all of this censorship.
Yeah, and the left that exists today is, they are cultural Marxists. All one needs to do is to go back and read the Protocols of Zion, and everything is spelled out there. And the Protocols of Zion goes back to the early 1900s, so it's over 100 years ago. The game plan and blueprint was spelled out. So if you have not read the Protocols of Zion, talking to the audience now, I would highly recommend that you get a copy of it. It is on the internet, and read it. And take a look at how they're explaining and describing how they're going to go about forming this new order. Now, Michael, I do want to mention one thing too before I lose the thought.
Sure.
These people that become like the spokespersons for these events, that in this case, we're going to talk about David Hogg. David Hogg has put himself out there after going out, being interviewed, being on news programs, talk shows, and so on, and numerous videos that obviously somebody is filming on his behalf and then putting out on social media. He has created a situation where he is a public figure, much like a celebrity. So when you put yourself out there as a public figure, then it's fair game with regard to people questioning you, even taking shots at you. You know, this is why celebrities have a very difficult time suing for slander and libel and stuff like that. It's because they are a public personality.
Mm-hmm. And just a quick little note I just want to throw in there. You'll have like NBA players reading mean tweets, and you'll hear the most god-awful stuff directed at them, but it's all in good fun. It's not a big deal. But you have this other person you're talking about now who's in a similar situation. They're becoming a public figure, and
right.
Nope, can't have any of that, even though he's actually saying he's dropping F-bombs all over the place when I hear him talk. You know?
Right.
So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly right. So he's off limits. So we can't talk about him. We can't question him. We can't dig into his background. We can't make logical connections between his father and the government, who was a former FBI agent. We're not supposed to talk about line of work that his father is in since he retired from the FBI. Shouldn't we look at that? But no, you are not to talk about that. And that's the thing. You are not to talk about people that can be researched. You see, this is why they allow a lot of other conspiracy stuff to exist, and nobody gives a crap. Mm-hmm. You could talk about UFOs and aliens. You could even talk about flat Earth till you're blue in the face. And they don't care about that stuff. You can talk about the occult. They don't care about that stuff because it's non-specific. You're talking about a concept at the end of the day on a lot of this stuff. You're presenting your view of material that you have researched, and you're giving your perspective on it. But in very few cases are there specific people attached to it. And when there are specific people attached to it, like Jimmy Savile with the whole pedophilia out of the UK, well, he's dead. So if you want to focus on a guy who's dead, go ahead.
Or it's just like, this person's a Mason. And it's like, well, that's not really a threat to anybody because the masses aren't going to give two shits about somebody being a Freemason. You know?
But the thing is, intrepid researchers and investigators can investigate and look into and talk to people who know David Hogg and know his family. And this is what they don't want. They don't want people digging into the details, because somewhere along the line, there are going to be people that are going to know people, and the story will begin to unfold. If we take a look at the way these things work, these people get introduced to us. They make a splash. They're all over the place, and then they kind of fade back into the woods. My guess is that there is going to be some reciprocation with regard to his involvement in this, doing what he did, being the spokesperson of what people are referring to as the drama club, right? There'll probably be some payoff. What that is, I don't know. It was like the guy that claimed that he was the boyfriend of the lady reporter that was allegedly shot point blank in West Virginia.
Oh my God, the month-iversary guy?
The guy, exactly.
Oh my God, that was so bad. Oh.
Well, and here's the thing, right? So he goes out and he does all this, and he's showing the book, and I loved her, and she was so sweet and all this stuff. He winds up with an anchor position on that television news program.
I did not know that.
Yeah, right. So he winds up with a decent job, and then he runs for political office.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah.
So I didn't follow it beyond that ridiculous dock shooting, whatever the hell it was. Like that was one of the worst ones.
Where the guy's 10 feet away and nobody knows he's
there.
Yeah. And she starts doing a 40-yard dash, and it's just unbelievable. Now that's not believable.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can't question that. The event was so unbelievable that most people looked at that and said, what? But if you questioned it, you ran the risk of having your content pulled or flagged.
Yeah, that's crazy that guy's in politics now basically because of that event.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm saying is that I'm not saying this is going to happen for David Hogg. What I'm saying is that it should not be a surprise if down the line, a year or 2 or 3 years later, we see that this kid is doing something that is like, well, how do you get there?
Yeah. It had nothing to do with his dad, used to be in the FBI. Nothing, just like that's the thing that pisses me off about a lot of this. It's like people are presented as just average, everyday people, in these events. And then when you look into their background, you're like, well, why are they connected to this and that? You would think that there would be some random person whose dad works at, CVS or something like that.
Exactly.
It's just like the Dave McGowan's stuff with all of the Laurel Canyon thing, and the other thing that was like, oh yeah, I remember what I was going to say, that's what I liked about We Need to Talk About Sandy Hook documentary. So many of those parents had these connections to big pharma, and then you see what gets pushed after the event, and it's connected to the things that the people had connections to. One of them was like an expert in removing internet slander and stuff like that. It was really strange, and if anybody hasn't seen that, I'd say go watch that, because that kind of like sets the tone for a lot of things going on now and kind of defines a blueprint, I think.
See, but that's the thing, Michael, exactly what you're talking about. See, people can research the background of these folks, right? And they are very specific. They are people. They have a life. They have done things. They know other people. And they do not want the alternative research community to be looking at that or talking about it. Or, yeah, you can look at it, but you're not going to present it. But we're going to make sure we're going to make it as difficult as possible for you to present any of your thoughts, any of your ideas, or any of your findings.
Yeah, or the people are kind of ghosts and have no background, and they're just kind of like, where'd this person come from? You can't find anything, and then you find, I think some guy did something on one of those quote unquote racial shootings, where I think it was this guy, Walter Scott Jr. I don't know. They tried to like find his house, and they found the house that he's supposed to live in, but it had been like abandoned, and like it was just sort of like all these weird things didn't add up, and it's just like the person is a ghost, or they have connections to very prominent institutions in government and corporate entities that are making big decisions.
Right. And this is the stuff that they don't want you to investigate. They certainly don't want you to put it out there. So whether the person is a ghost, their persona has been fabricated, or they are real people and who have real backgrounds and real interaction with other people, you're not going to talk about that either. That's why in my view, why talking about these events, these shootings and so on, is much different than other conspiracy topics that are, you're free to talk about it, till you're blue in the face. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, talk about it. They don't care.
Yeah, you can add all the numbers up in this event and say it means something to your heart's content. But when you actually, and to me, all of this stuff, the reason it's so dangerous is because this is the next level from people who are in the Matrix to kind of cross over into, because all of that news is in their face 24/7 because they're the ones that watch it. And so when you're quote unquote, fighting the battle on that front, you're on that ground where it's bordering into that world. Whereas when people start getting into occult stuff, you're not going to convince anybody anything weird's going on because, the Twin Towers was built like Solomon's Temple.
Right.
Like, people are just going to be weirded out by that. And that's like another layer to it. Now, maybe some people who have more of a religious background might be more receptive to that, but the modern materialistic person is not going to give two craps about that. And, there's a difference between like intuitive evidence, like this is really weird. Why would all of this religion be built into something, versus the cold, hard facts that we've kind of been programmed to condition, like what we can prove in court. Like it's sort of like we kind of use that like LA or what's the Law and Order type mindset oh, we need to find DNA evidence and blah, you know, like we only accept that because, I mean, obviously that's part of like how, you know, that's a TV show, but like that's kind of what people are looking for when legal things happen, like these.
Right.
And so we've been conditioned to think that's the only way that we can assess something as being true or false. We're, again, it's a big part of it, but that kind of downplays just basic intuition, like the idea of like Robbie Parker smiling for the camera after his little girl had just been brutally shot hours earlier. Like we're that's not allowed to be any sort of real proof, but that's kind of negating that other part of the brain that's more intuitive. Like, you can show me all the facts in the world, something's very fucked up about that. So they've kind of disconnected us from that. So when you're in that battle of like that left brain thinking, that's kind of where it's dangerous to them, because that's how we grow up with the SAT scores. That's the most important thing to prove your intelligence, right?
Right. And you know, even before you get DNA, you have to have a theory, right? So if a police detective is going to investigate a crime, they have to theorize about what could have happened, and then start talking to people and start piecing it together and connecting dots. And that's what then leads to very specific, very hard evidence. So what they don't want us to do, they don't want us to do that police work, that detective work. They don't want that to take place. Where we're at, Michael, is an area that very few people will ever understand. Is we're in a danger zone. You know, they are shutting down the dissidents, people that do not think the way they think, do not believe what they want us to believe, and speak the way, you know, they want us to speak. They don't want free thought, free thinking, critical thinking. They don't want any of that, you know. So that's what they're shutting down now. I was listening to one of the videos I put up on my blog, and I forgot who presented it, but they threw a statistic out there that was astonishing to me. They said that the average IQ in the United States is 98. 98, you are not a bright bulb, okay? So, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, for the most part, they've got most of the population in their back pocket. Because with an IQ of 98, you're not going to react to too many things. You're not going to focus on too many things. You're not going to care. Basically, you get up in the morning, you're inhaling, exhaling, do whatever you do. You go to bed at night, wake up the next day, and you know, you do your inhaling and exhaling again. So their problem is still that pocket of people who are critically thinking, because it's the people who critically think, it's the people that have a brain in their head that can make things happen. They're the people that could become leaders. They're the people that can rally other people, right? Because most folks, they're followers, they're not leaders. And we know this. Just look at society today. That's why we say we have surrounded by sheep, right? Sheeple. The critical thinkers and the free thinkers, they can become the good shepherds and, you know, say to the sheep, come this way. I want you to take a look at something here. I'm going to show you, and I'm going to teach, and I'm going to get you to hopefully understand that you have been misled. And they don't want that. We've seen this before. We've seen this so many times in history, where the dissidents, the people that cut across the grain, they went after them with a vengeance. You know, and that's the area that we're in right now. I think, you know, we're definitely in the beginning stages of that process. I give it another 10 years or so, if it even takes that long, where, you know, I wouldn't doubt that they wouldn't just knock on doors and say, you're coming with us now. And people think, oh, that would never happen. Okay. You just keep thinking that way.
Yeah. And, you know, since YouTube is one of those things that it's like everybody has a YouTube account, you know, and
yeah,
99.9% of YouTube people are using it probably for not the most productive things. And I'm not saying that I'm innocent in that. I've definitely watched some pretty dumb videos from time to time, but it's that most people are, that's all it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, oh, I'm only watching this Miley Cyrus video or this funny video about cats or something. And again, I'm not knocking videos on cats, but when that's just all that your life is, then they have you, you know? And so, but it's one of the platforms that the alternative, you know, quote unquote, truther community was able to put stuff out and be a presence. But that community is like 0.5% of YouTube. You know what I mean? It might be growing a lot, but it's going to grow to like 0.7%, you know? And so if they can get rid of that completely, then it's just going to be the hamster wheel. And since we're talking about that, we can kind of transition into, you know, what are some alternatives? What are some ways to go about it now that we know this is kind of happening? You know, there's the option of fighting things. There's the option of migrating things. There's the option of just giving up. You know, like there's lots of different options. What are some things that you've thought about and you've heard about or looked into, or what are some things that you think might be good ideas to look into or transition into?
I have started loading my material up to DTube, which is part of Steemit. That's going well. You and I have talked about this in emails and a little offline, but DTube has some refining it has to do. It has to evolve some more. As an example, they do not have the ability to create playlists, which is very important because the work that you do and I do and many others, we have specific topics, right? So it could be mind control, it could be the occult, it could be vaccines or whatever, geoengineering. So you want to be able to group your material into those categories, and you can't do that on DTube. Best that I know, I've looked and looked and looked, and I don't see that functionality there.
I couldn't find it either.
Yeah. So but I'm sure as more and more folks jump there, that they will add that functionality. At least I'm hoping. I signed up for BitChute, but I haven't loaded anything up there yet. It was just a recent thing that I did. I have my blog, and aside from Google screwing around with it every once in a while with the views in Europe, that's been another mechanism that's allowed me to keep the ship afloat. I do about 120,000 views a month on the blog.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's great, but when I talk to folks about it who are in the truth community and the alternative research community, like that's pretty good. And I guess it is because where we are, it is very niche, right? The average person walking around with an IQ of 98 is not going to be going to my blog. So so you can do stuff like that. The other alternative is that you can put your own website up and you can host your own material. Now, there is a downside to that in the sense that if there's some kind of copyright issue, then you will find yourself confronted with that personally. That's my understanding. But with these larger outlets like YouTube, as an example, if there's a copyright issue, they act as the intermediary. So they receive a copyright complaint, they flag the video, YouTube does, and basically you are protected from direct intervention or confrontation with the copyright owner. So, and the reason why I think that's important is because you could have a lawsuit levied your way for material that is copyrighted, right? So there's a buffer there that is a lot of people don't realize is actually very important. So if you're going to host your own material on your own server, I'm not so sure it's going to work like that. I think whoever your host is going to pass the buck and say, oh, well, our terms and conditions say that he or she's responsible for their content. So you need to send your lawyer letters over to him or her.
And that's what I wonder about DTube and Steemit, because if it's all this blockchain thing that's supposedly decentralized, what happens when those issues arise? I don't know. Maybe you've looked into it, or we could just speculate, but that's kind of a weird thing to think about.
I haven't thought about it, and it's a good question. And these are things that are going to come up. They will come up because what will happen is as these alternative vehicles are being sought after by people in the truth community and the alternative research community, because we're getting kicked off of YouTube, the waters are going to get tested. No question about it. Because let's face it, the people who do the controlling, they're not going to go, oh, you got me. You're on Steemit, or you're on DTube. So, okay, you figured it out. It just doesn't work that way. And so they're going to constantly go after that material. And it's going to be interesting to see how it rolls out if some of these other platforms actually do grow to a presence where it is leaning into YouTube's territory or their prominence.
At some point, I was probably making a little separate video on this. I went through several different video hosting places and wrote down a list of pros and cons as far as I've researched. But for me and you, we can talk a little bit about Steemit and DTube and our experiences so far with it, because, that's one place that people are suggesting people go. And this is kind of the way I look at it. There's not going to be one grand solution, some truther oasis where, everyone can just go and we're all going to be able to say what we want and there's never going to be any harassment. And actually, I feel like that would be kind of dangerous to have it all in one place. So having a bit of diversity, I think, if people are going to look to leave YouTube and that's sort of like this sinking ship. But I think it's important to know the pros and cons and what, for the person, are you a content creator? Do you just watch videos and you just want to find stuff? You kind of have to define your situation and then figure out what platform might be best for you. And I think with Steemit, here's a couple of cons that I've kind of come across, and I just wanted to go through, and then you can just let me know maybe some of your frustrations with it. Let's focus on the negative.
Well, you
first.
probably know more about it than me, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but just, first impressions, and that can mean a lot, For me, one, it's complicated.
Yes.
You get like 3 or 4 different keys, which are just codes to log in when you want to do certain actions. If you just want to post, you can have a posting key. If you want to make money transactions or Steam transactions, you have to have a different key. And then there's like a master one. And this is what I've learned, is that if you lose certain keys, especially your master key, you're fucked. You can't recover it. There's no way you can recover it. You can never get back in your account, as far as I understand it. So you are supposed to like write that down and put it in a safe place. Now, if somebody finds that, they can take over your account and you'll never be able to get it back. So if you had a lot of cryptocurrency, for people just starting out, that's not going to really matter. You're not going to make any money on it until you've developed something. So that part of it is very complicated. And also it will take you a while to get approved. It took me like a week and a half for them to actually approve my account. And then just the process of it and understanding the 3 different types of crypto, like there's Steam Power, and Steam Dollars. I might have that wrong or something like that. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on like the system of it, just at first glance?
It's complicated in my view. I really don't understand the whole Steam bit of it, the money aspect of it. So I'm still trying to learn that. And I guess, I'm sounding like a real neophyte here. There's probably folks listening to this like, what do you mean you don't understand that? But, there is a learning curve with it. It's not as intuitive as these more mature platforms. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. The other thing is that I could not find a way, and maybe I'm wrong. So if I am, folks, please feel free to comment or to reach out to Michael or I. I don't think you can delete a video. So once you upload a video, I didn't see a way to delete it.
Same thing with posts, I think.
Yeah. So it's out there. It's like some people say it's good because it doesn't go into the memory hole. But I'm like, well, sometimes you may want to delete something for reasons you don't like it or you don't like the way it came out.
Maybe you revealed too much information about yourself and you realize that was a mistake,
Yeah. I mean, you just, you want the ability to be able to remove it. I mean, I have hardly ever done that on my own channel on YouTube, but you should have the option to be able to do that.
The best you can do is make another account and then flag all your stuff so it gets hidden. That's just like a comical way of doing it. But yeah, and to just elaborate on that, there are some politics involved. So people, well, first off, if people are going there, like you said, like being like a neophyte to these things, there's nothing wrong with that. The average person isn't going to understand all of that crypto blockchain crap. I don't understand it. I mean, I'm on there. So that's a hard transition for a lot of people to make when the majority of people just don't want a complicated process. So to me, Steemit is kind of like this weird, unique experiment that it's not for everyone. That's just my personal opinion.
I agree. And it really shouldn't be complicated because you want to be able to just make your material and want to be able to manage it, upload it, and so on. When you drive your car, you just want to drive your car. You don't need to know all of the mechanics behind why the car does what it does, right? I don't know. I think that they really do have to simplify it some more, especially if they want to grow their presence, because if it's too complicated and people don't understand it and it's lacking functionality that people have become accustomed to, then it's not going to be viable in the long run. Today, it's becoming viable because, well, people are getting thrown off YouTube. So people are scurrying around trying to figure out what's an alternative platform. But if Steemit or DTube do not make it easier and more understandable to the average content provider, then I think it's going to struggle in that area, and then perhaps maybe another platform will open up and make it easier for us.
Yeah, and if it's one of these things that it's this new experiment, it's kind of like this. To me, it's a risk. It's like you can get in at the ground level if you want to look at it from like the crypto money making part of it. Maybe it could blow up and you could have been there at the beginning and been integrated into it.
Right.
But that was sort of like what attracted to me to it in a way, because like I'm not somebody like the monetary thing, like I'm not against people monetizing stuff, but I personally need to feel comfortable about the way I'm doing that. And so I thought, okay, Steemit's cool. I don't have to invest any money. I can just create content. And if I get enough people enjoying it, that might be able to produce something. But now, after having been on it for a couple months, there's a lot of politics, I think, that are involved, and a lot of little games, I think, that are really turn me off. And I'll just give an example. Maybe you've kind of noticed some of these things and you might not have known like what they were about. One, it's weird to me. It's like I have 36 followers right now, but I really think like half of them are bots pages or like spammy type accounts, because I'll look at their stuff. One will just be making these really weird generic posts about cryptocurrency, and they don't have like comments that they made. Yeah. So I'm like, well, that's weird. And then there's some that like the people will respond to comments, but they're really generic. And I'm like, I don't know if maybe this person doesn't have much time and they're just cutting and pasting stuff, or they're actually not a person. And then some are, posting like travel options and food and all of this kind of, in the matrix stuff, where it's just like generic kind of like things that somebody might think is interesting, pictures of, exotic locations. I'm like, well, is this person a truther? Is this somebody like living in that world, but they secretly want to look at occult science? Or is that just somebody that's trying to follow you to get you to go over to their stuff and try to follow them, like these little psychological games where, it's just natural. If you get a new follower, you're like, oh, who's this person? Let me go check them out, Right. And then I've been disappointed almost 80 to 90% of the time of the people who follow me. They have nothing even remotely resembling any truther content. And that's concerning to me because like, I don't want hollow followers. I don't give a shit about that. I don't even care if there's ways of getting like crypto from them because they upvote stuff. Like that still means nothing to me, So I'm really like, I'm seeing it as a political game over there. And then there's these people who are called whales. And before I let you jump in, I just want to share a quick story. There's a guy over there called Activist News. I've been on his show, or he'll just interview people here and there. I talked with him one time. His name is Daniel, and he's a guy who talks a lot about Zionism and World War II revisionism, and he's pretty straightforward about it. So he's had censorship issues. He kind of puts himself out there, and that's his choice. But he's been censored over there in a different way, where a lot of his posts on, revisionism or whatever, somebody will flag it in the way that they downvote it, and then it gets hidden from the public because of low ratings. So only people who see it are on his channel. So it doesn't get removed. It's not censored in that way. But if you upset somebody who has power on Steemit, they can completely fuck you. Even if you gained, a certain amount of, let's say you make 50, 60, maybe even couple $100 a month or even a week on there. If you get one of these whales who might have a political agenda of their own targeting you and downvoting all your shit, you're going to be completely screwed over. And you wonder, well, who are these whales at the top? Are they the same people with the same agenda as like the YouTube censors? I don't know. That's a big concern for me.
Well, I approach it this way. First of all, there's lots of bots out there, and So they exist no matter what platform you're on. And Michael, my thought on this is that none of these platforms are free of the controllers. None of them. So at some point, if Steemit or DTube becomes a presence, you can bet your bottom dollar that there's going to be censorship and there's going to be rules that are going to come down that people didn't think existed before. I mean, it's the same thing. YouTube started the same way. So YouTube, when it first came about, was, hey, you're creative, be you, put your stuff out there. This is for you. We don't care. Just express yourself. And it's come down to this. So all of these platforms are controlled. There are people that are pulling the strings at the top. So I never think in terms of that we have a vehicle where, oh my God, we're free of these people. We are not free of them. We're not. Everything is controlled.
It's just the way that they're going to come at you might vary.
Yeah, exactly. And so, they are very patient. They will wait. And then when they believe it's time to move, they will move. So even the whole thing with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, I mean, I don't buy into the approach or the thought process that says that, this is breaking free of the control system, that this is breaking free from the central banking system. It's ridiculous. How could anybody, especially people who are doing alternative research and being in conspiracy research, that have looked into what money means as a control mechanism overall? I mean, it's the ace in the hole when you think about it, right? Everybody's chasing money. Everybody wants money. And to think that cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is not part of the agenda to go paperless, to go digital, it makes me laugh sometimes. I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I remember going back a few years ago, several years ago, people were who were researching and stuff like that were really alarmed about the fact that too many people were using ATMs, using an ATM card because it was paperless. They're getting rid of actual money. Forget about the fact that fiat money doesn't have anything to back it anyway. But that's the thought process. Hey, if I have paper in my hand, it's tangible. Hey, you guys are using the ATM too much. If you do that, it's leading to the elimination of real money or paper money, and we're going into this world of digital currency, and that's the world where if you don't toe the line, they could start screwing with turning things off on you, your ability to pay for things or your ability to maybe get money out of the bank, whatever it may be. So I remember this whole conversation, people concerned about it. Then we're going to this whole like cryptocurrency thing, and the very same people that were complaining about ATMs and all that are now like, oh, this is great. We've broken free from the matrix. I'm like, no, you haven't broken free from the matrix. If you think for 1 second that the people who control this world are going to allow anything, any control to slip through their fingers, you're nuts. It's not going to happen. People might say, well, then, Mike, what's the answer? Well, the answer is to continue to navigate your way through their minefield and do the best you can to live a life that is as free from their traps as you possibly can. That's
at least really, not lose a limb.
and not lose a limb on it. Okay, so that's my response. And a lot of people don't like that because they're looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. They're looking for some panacea. They're looking for something which is going to unlock the door. And as soon as we open that door, it's just going to be rainbows and unicorns. It's just going to be great. And that's just not going to happen. It's not the world we live in. It's a world we're trying to change. Yes, absolutely. But like right now, in the foreseeable future, the people who are in control are in control. And our job is to do the best we can to wake people up to that control and increase the awareness so that hopefully we can make some change going forward. Not in our generation. I tell people this too, and they get disappointed. When is this going to happen, Mike? I'm going to be long gone. Okay. We're doing table setting and we're going to pass the baton. And that's why it's really important for the young people, Michael, for the young people to pick up that baton and run with it because they are the future. And this is why they target the young people. This is why they go after them. This is why they indoctrinate them and propagandize them, because they know that if the younger folks pick up on this, then that thread on the sleeve, you pull it, the sleeve will fall off. And that's why they're very, very keen on making sure the young people continue to stay indoctrinated into the system. It's a war. It really is. It's a war for the minds of people. And they're trying to steal your mind, and we're trying to give you back your mind. But unfortunately, the mechanisms in which we need to be able to get people to put their minds back into their heads, their thinking, these mechanisms to communicate are owned by them. They control those mechanisms. They control the media. They control academia. And that's why it's a very painful process we're going through. But even though it's very painful and it's very difficult, we have to keep going.
Yeah, it's kind of like things aren't going to be as glorious as you envision them to be, like making a win. You know what I mean? It's not
right.
like it's like, I guess it's people getting overly excited about something to the point where I kind of think it's a little delusional. And again, you and I are very similar in this Saturnian sense where, like, we're kind of like showing all of the red flags that will, like, eventually these are things are going to happen. And, it's not like we don't want to be positive about stuff, but we also need to be realistic about it. And so, right. There's a lot of people who, DTube is the answer. This is going to solve everything and blah, 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 blah. And, the thing is, I still have those moments where I'm like, okay, yeah, this is an opportunity to go do something else. And I got excited about Steemit. I had all these ideas about things I wanted to do on it. But then once you get there, I started to see the reality of it. And that's just
right.
a lot of the things I talked about with the politics and whatever. It's kind of hard to get noticed. I noticed that there's search engines. There is no search engine. You have to just type in keywords to trending. And it's just it's hard for people to find you, and you can't edit your posts after 7 days. That was a huge problem for me. And you don't know, like, how do you request changes? Like, who do I go to be like, hey, can we get playlists on DTube? Like, there's no like group or that I know of. It's just it's like this weird experiment. And if you're in it, if you're cool with like those ups and downs and like that kind of more, I guess, put it in an astrological archetype, the Uranian vibe of it, where it's just kind of like this risk. There's these sudden changes to it. It could be a really awesome change or a really bad change. I think like Steemit is that kind of place. And I'm not sure, like my whole thing is like, if I'm going to hunker down and just upload like my entire occult science series, something like that, I want to pick the best place possible for that, because I need to invest a lot of time in something. And so I'm looking at the least amount of risk for my own personal situation, but somebody else's situation, they might be a different person than I am. So I'm just trying to throw out my own issues with Steemit. And if some people might be like, I don't have an issue with that, then that's great. That's their own individuality. But the other, well, I'll talk about a couple quick positive things of Steemit that I found. I like the simplicity of the posting. It's very easy on the eyes. There's not like a lot of clutter. There's no ads in the side, stuff like that. It's pretty simple to do. And it is nice in the way that there is a potential. There is an upside, like if things progress with it, that you could, some people do get some monetization on it, if that's kind of your thing. And it is connected to DTube, which makes it simple. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I can post a blog or I can post a video. That kind of thing is nice. As of now, it seems to not be super heavily censored. But other than that, it's been a little disappointing for me personally, just based on my first few months here. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the positive that I've seen with it is that it does show up in the Google search results. It's up there like on the first page.
Yes,
so
that is true for sure.
Yeah, so I was checking that out. So that's good. But like I said, it's going to have some growing pains that it's going to have to go through as it matures, and hopefully it does mature, and hopefully they get it to the point where it has at least it's equal to the functionality that we enjoy on YouTube. But YouTube is not viable for us anymore, because at some point they're going to, they're just going to systematically shut us down. And nobody's doing anything about it. Everybody's talking about what a wonderful job that a lot of on the alt-right, a lot of these channels about Trump and stuff like that. And I just kind of laugh. I'm thinking to myself, well, one of the big reasons why he is in that office is because a lot of the alt-right channels, and I don't consider myself to be an alt-right channel, but I'm talking about InfoWars as an example, right?
Yeah.
Use them as an example. They're the reason, a big reason as to why he's where he's at, and a big reason as to why he was able to get his message out before the election. So, they were being used as a vehicle, basically now we can look back at it and say as a tool.
But at the same time, what was the alternative,
Well, no, that's exactly right. Well, I'll tell you a little story about that in a second. Just remind me to circle back to that. I'll tell you what I did. So the thing is now, supposedly Alex Jones and InfoWars is, facing a situation where they have received community guideline strikes and they're going to have their channel taken down. So somebody has to ask themselves, well, if that particular channel and that particular organization was instrumental in the president being able to get his message out and then ultimately getting elected, why isn't the guy that got elected, why isn't he doing anything about what's going on at YouTube or any social media platform? See, that's the thing that gets me. Why wouldn't he go to the Justice Department and say, you need to go look at this stuff because what's going on is not right? None of that, to the best of my knowledge, is taking place. None of it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I don't have a problem with somebody being pro-Trump for certain things or whatever. Like, that's somebody's opinion. That's somebody's opinion. But again, it's this over-investation in something that it's not. Like, oh, he's actually this secretive Q thing going and draining the swamp, but it's got to be done in this weird secret way. It's just like, come on, really? Like, you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know. It's weird because you talk about the alt-right. It's like you and I, we have stuff and viewpoints that kind of cross over into that area.
Yeah.
But that can be a certain stance on an issue, but that doesn't mean that we're for the political paradigm of it.
People have to understand that the whole Muslim situation and the refugees in Europe and all that, that's all engineered. That's all been orchestrated to happen. This is the power that these controllers have. Then blaming, as an example, in San Bernardino, that whole thing on two Muslims. Now, InfoWars jumped on that wagon, right? So they're playing along with that narrative. I don't play along with that narrative. I cross over from a standpoint of, and I don't even know if it's crossing over, but I will say and talk about the fact that that whole refugee situation and bringing people into Europe and changing the whole demographic in the mix of Europe, that's control, that's orchestrated, that's engineered. But I don't run around taking the mainstream narrative and blaming Muslims on things like San Bernardino, because if you use your critical thinking faculties, you'll know that San Bernardino, it's like all these other events. It's all orchestrated and engineered, and they needed a patsy, somebody to tag it on, because there's an agenda. There's an agenda to vilify certain people. Now, it's not to say that certain people aren't doing bad things around the world, okay? But not everybody who belongs to a particular religious group is doing bad things or subscribes to bad things or is crazy. It would be like turning around and saying that everybody who's a Roman Catholic has to be a pedophile because the Vatican, and for the longest time, they're heavily involved in child trafficking and pedophilia. But you don't run around to all the Roman Catholics and say, well, you're Roman Catholic, so you must be a pedophile. Yeah,
exactly. And if you agree with certain viewpoints that, what it means to be Roman Catholic, if you like, oh, I can get behind this concept or this teaching,
right,
that's fine. But this is the polarity game where they want to lump you all into one thing. And unfortunately, I think that some of these people on the quote unquote alt-right have kind of fallen for a trap in that the savior programming of Trump, you know what I mean? Where it's just like,
or the psyop.
Yeah. And
I hate to say things like that, but I've been watching InfoWars, Michael, for a long time, and I started I started cutting my teeth on conspiracy with InfoWars, like many other people, and reading David Icke's books. And I have seen a very, very distinct turn in InfoWars. InfoWars used to talk a lot about hardcore conspiracy stuff. I'm not saying, some people say, they were never hardcore. I'm like, okay, whatever. But I remember them talking about geoengineering, talking about pedophilia, talking about vaccines, talking about flu shots, talking about fluoride, talking about all of this stuff, awakening a lot of people, Joe Sixpack, to these concepts and these theories. And what I've seen, starting with the election and then Trump getting elected, is a very, very different veneer that InfoWars is presenting. Every once in a while, they still might tap on some of those things, but to me, they have become an absolute mouthpiece for the White House. And that's never a good thing, because you're not being objective. To me, they are no longer objective in any way. And I have a problem with that. When you do your work, one of the things I always commented on when you came on my show is you were very objective. You presented the material and you explained it. And then it was up to the audience to make a decision and decide what it is they wanted to take away from that. Present the facts, right? Mm-hmm. Present the facts. But a lot of these alt-right channels now, they're not presenting facts. They're presenting agendas as fact, and they're running with it. And they're trying to convince as many people as they possibly can. Here, come on over into our yard, mm-hmm. Come here. And I don't know. To me, it's very disappointing.
Yeah, it's frustrating too, because I know a lot of people will say, well, Alex Jones has been controlled from the beginning and he's probably some CIA agent or something like that. And I think with things like that, there's so many different scenarios surrounding people that you don't really understand that could contribute to, somebody perhaps falling into a trap for very different reasons than you might think. A lot of it is it can be emotional. Like think about when Trump won, there was still this grand triumph from the truther community to some extent, besides, if some people were like, I don't want to have anything to do with it, and it's just sort of this, it's kind of like when your team wins a game, right? And you're like, oh my God, and you're riding high on that for a while, but then you go back to reality a couple weeks later, and it's just it was this almost this dream that wasn't anything of substance. Yeah. That's kind of the way I look at it. I'll admit, even for me, just because I saw the media propaganda against Trump, just from an instinctive level, I was excited that he won because of the alternative, Hillary Clinton. What, you know what I mean? I can't deny that. I'm not going to pretend that didn't give me a sense of excitement, but some people, it seems like they're trying to take that excitement and carry it farther than it actually, the real reality or the real questions you're talking about, well, why isn't the Trump administration cracking down on YouTube censorship of alt-right if that's what propped them up? Right. That's very suspicious. That's a great point. I never thought about it, but it makes a lot of sense,
Yeah, well, the thing is with, I was very hopeful with Trump too. I wasn't naive, but if we go back to, if we play clips, Michael, of what he was talking about in his speeches leading up to the election, he was playing back many of the alternative research and truth community theories and understandings of what's really going on in the world and what needs to change. And Trump was playing that. He was playing that card. Now, I had done a video on YouTube, not YouTube, excuse me, Facebook. And I said to my friends, look, I was going to sit this election out, but I've decided that I'm going to go vote for Trump. So I voted for Trump. And my rationale was, look, one of those two people is going to be sitting in the White House, him or that witch, Hillary. Okay. And we all know about the Clintons. And if you don't know about the trail of carnage and dysfunction and fraud and death that is behind the Clintons, then you have been sleeping under a rock for a long time. Mm-hmm. So, so the thing is, somebody's going to be sitting in that White House. And the truth of the matter is, no matter how much so many people in the research community want to talk a big game about disconnecting, living off the grid, I'm not part of this. Look, you are, okay? We exist in this system. We exist in this matrix. If you have to go buy food, you're in the matrix. If you have to go drive your car and have a license or registration and insurance, you're in the system. So that, to me, was the reason why I said, look, he's going to be better than her, based upon the things that he was saying.
The lesser of two evils.
The lesser of two evils, exactly.
That's exactly my mindset when the whole election was going on,
So, and the thing is, some people will say, well, lesser of two evils, evil is still evil. Well, you know what? She's evil, okay?
Mm-hmm. And whether I vote or not, somebody's going to get elected, and it does impact things that happen to some degree,
To some degree, and in many cases to a large degree. And that's what people like to pretend that somehow they're on the outside, that they're not really affected by this, but you are affected by it, right? If you're going to be taxed, if taxes go up, you are affected by it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, one of my biggest reasons for hoping that Trump won is because I don't have health insurance because the Obamacare fucked me over. Right. I couldn't afford it. And I also had to pay a goddamn tax to not have health insurance. And since I'm self-employed, like I like every year it's gone up, and you have to pay $500, $600, $700, $800 just to not have health insurance. What the fuck? And so I was like, well, if Trump can get rid of that, at least that's my in the matrix benefit of having Trump as president. And I think that that's going to be gone next year for me, but that's my own self-interest. But like, I still have to think about that kind of thing. I'm not naive, like you said, thinking I'm just so enlightened and I can just detach and I'm often, I'm off grid. Like maybe some people can do that and good for them, but for the vast majority of us, that's just not a reasonable option for a lot of people.
Look, if you work, you're in the system, especially, if you work and you're being taxed. So you're in the system. So the big thing for me was, yes, Obamacare was one because it was a total debacle, and it was designed to be a way of siphoning more of your wealth from you. He talked about the tax cuts, which wound up, he put them through, but no great shakes. Put more money in our pockets, so there was a lot of stuff he talked about. He also brought up vaccines, right? Mm-hmm. RFK Jr. was going to head up I guess a council to take a look at vaccines, because he had mentioned in one or two of the debates that he believed that vaccines could be problematic. Nothing ever came of that, to the best of my knowledge. But the thing was, like you said, somebody's going to be sitting in the White House, so we were trying to get a person in there that could do the least amount of damage to us. Mm-hmm. That was my take on it. But now you take a look at it, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm seeing now that I'm thinking to myself, this is really more of the same. The Zionists have him in his back pocket. He constantly talks about how much he loves Israel.
Yeah.
And I look at that and I think to myself, as somebody who understands what's going on, and I've done a lot of research into Israel. I've done a lot of research into Zionism, a lot of research into the Khazars. Embracing this is not something we should be doing, okay? Mm-hmm. And when you embrace it, what happens is it becomes very, very disheartening. Now, it was disheartening to me when he was talking about it when he was running too, but I was hoping, and I was hoping against hope, that perhaps maybe it was just placating. Right, because if you don't placate, if you don't play ball with AIPAC, if you don't play ball with the Israelis, guess what? You're not going anywhere. Okay, you're not getting elected. Period. Not going to happen.
Yeah, and that's very, that's another thing that it's the reality of the situation. There's never going to be somebody in a high position like that who's all of a sudden just going to do all these things like. That's all of a sudden is not going to, be harassing Syria. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not naive to think that like we were never going to have wars again or anything like that. It's just like we were talking about small little things that, hey, I would just like to not have this goddamn health tax. That if that's going to get done, then there you go. I can support that. But beyond that, I'm not expecting some president to come be like, yes, 9/11 was an inside job. That's never going to fucking happen. It's just like, and then people, when that doesn't happen, then they go crazy about it. And it's just like, oh my God, he betrayed us. I'm like, did you really think that all of a sudden, like some president's going to get up there and start unveiling every conspiracy? You know what I mean? It's just, that's not reality, Yeah,
no, it's not reality. And the thing was, I was with you. I was looking for little breaks here and there to give us some more breathing room, ease up on some things that are, because what they like to do is they want to siphon off our wealth. So whatever little money people have, most people, they're looking to take more and more and more. And so, not to kick this around too much, but somebody was going to sit in that Oval Office. Was it going to be him or was it going to be Hillary? I decided that it was better to have him than Hillary. At the end of the day, that's what it came down to.
Yeah. And then people, it's the context of everything. Like we're defining the exact context of how we feel about it, where somebody, they'll just come along and be like, you guys are supporting Trump. It's just like, well, you got to realize what we're actually saying. And that's the problem, like you said, with people who will do that. They'll define the context of things, be objective about this or that, and lay things out that isn't just, some big concept. You'll start defining the concept. You'll combine the macro with the micro, and that's the problem now. The people that are doing that are really being taken out on this YouTube purge, and it's disheartening. But just to I guess we can wrap up in a little bit here, but I just wanted to throw one more thing in. I know you mentioned signing up for BitChute. I did kind of play around on there a little bit, and I'll just say that one thing that's a positive about BitChute, especially if you're a person that's just looking for content and perhaps not really needing to create stuff, their main page where, they give you the feed of the most popular videos, almost all of them were like truther type videos. That was very surprising to me and encouraging. Whereas Steemit, if you go to their trending stuff, you're not going to find anything like this on just not being logged in and having preferences or, subscriptions. And so that was one thing that I found kind of impressive. And then some people have said that BitChute has some connections back to some corporate Google thing. I don't know if that's even true, but I did read the message on the site, and the creator's message was anti-censorship, and they said that they were part of a small team. Now, however legitimate that is, I don't know. Yep. But it seems to be the case when I look at videos and see what's on there right now. So if people are just looking for a place to go, it's really easy to sign up. The upload, I tried to upload one video, it took forever. That was kind of a pain in the butt, but same thing with DTube, no different.
DTube, yeah.
And so I don't know, it's if you're just kind of the average person that doesn't want a lot of weird bells and whistles and complications, I think BitChute's much more user friendly in that regard.
Yeah, I was thinking of with DTube only putting up going back a year content. I wasn't going to go back 4 years, just be uploading, forever. So I think I'm just going to put a base of 1 year's worth of shows there, and then moving forward, the new shows will go there. But I now hearing you talk about BitChute, and I'm going to have to maybe tomorrow, or the next day, check it out and start putting the material up there as well.
Mm-hmm. I just want to mention one more option in case people are interested. It's more for like if people want to do something more professionally. I'm on Vimeo, and it does cost money to put stuff up there or get enough. Like there's different plans, and the higher you pay, the more uploading capacity you have. But there are options to do an on-demand where you can like create content, and people can do a subscription per month to pay like $5 a month to view all your content. You can make like maybe a big documentary and do that on demand and sell it for like $5 or something. So if people are doing more professional type stuff and they do want to find some way to help sustain that and monetize it, Vimeo might be a decent option. But again, that's like more of a specific niche for people. And I think Steemit's the same way. But as of now, as far as I can see, BitChute is better for the regular stuff, but there's no playlist there. But perhaps since they have a team, maybe you can contact them and request it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so since we're running out of time here, I don't know if there's any closing thoughts or any topics you think that we missed that you wanted to just mention before we finish.
No, I think we're good, Michael. We covered a lot of ground. We just need to keep doing what we're doing, and it's not going to be easy. They're going to make it very difficult for us to continue to get the word out, but we have to be creative and persevere and just do what we can to continue to push the ball forward. And that's all we can do. There's no panacea. There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, as long as we've got the situation we have with the living in the matrix and having the controllers. They're going to make sure that that they stifle us best they can, but we just keep going. We don't give up.
Mm-hmm. So since we've discussed a lot of the boons and the pitfalls of things, are there any, like, I guess maybe wrapping it up on some positive note, what are some positive things that we can take out of this YouTube thing pushing forward? Well,
the actual good news is that it's forcing a lot of people to get up and to look at alternatives, because there was a complacency. It was comfortable. YouTube was comfortable to be there. And so now, the reality of them not wanting you there, it's like kicking you out of their house. Get out of here. We don't want you here anymore. You can't live here anymore. Well, now you've got to go out. You've got to go find a new place to live. And so I think the good news, the upside is that it's forcing the truth community and the alternative research community to go out and to explore and discover new vehicles. Some of them may work, some of them may not, and it'll be the stuff in between. But I think that that's a very positive thing versus relying on this behemoth that really doesn't want us there. So I think that that's a positive, because I'm guilty of it myself. YouTube is very easy to use. You have your subscriber base, and so you would like it to continue to chug along. But the reality is they don't want you to continue to chug along. They want you out of here. So
what do you think about trying to coexist in two worlds with posting certain things on YouTube and then having breadcrumbs that lead to the other platforms? Do you think that they're even going to crack down on that and not allow outside links? Or do you think that might be something that's viable and we might just have to adjust to?
Yeah, I think you can have two. I think that they will begin to crack down on what I refer to as trailers, right? So as an example, you and I will do this show and we will have a link that says, hey, we talked about whatever, head over to DTube or BitChute to watch the interview. I think that I wouldn't put it past them to take those trailers down and give us a community guideline strike, because the link that you had in your description box led to a show or a clip that was threatening, harassing, bullying. There's no doubt in my mind that they'll go in that direction.
Shit, Mike, don't give them ideas.
No, they already know. Right?
I think that's an Illuminati playing card, that the Illuminati love getting ideas from conspiracy theorists on how to suppress them.
I was actually thinking of putting titles up like, Michael Joseph and Mike Williams, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or something like that. It's just making up some bizarre, some crazy title that means nothing.
I always thought it would be a good idea. Like, let's say somebody wanted to fund, I don't know, like a balloon launch to look at the horizon line at 200,000 feet or something.
Yeah.
And this would require people actually working together, which is why it's a ridiculous idea. But I think it would be kind of funny where if you could get one channel that didn't have any truth or crap, just make one and make a video talking about, the burger you ate at McDonald's and how awesome it was, and tell everybody to go over there and not only watch it several times, but always click on the ad and see if you can generate revenue from the ad, and just try to get every truther over there, like just going crazy on it. And then Google can fund the balloon launch. You know what I mean? Like, obviously that would never work, because people would be, who gets the money, and people would be, oh, this is a shill or whatever. But like, it's just a funny concept, just thinking about something like that. But, I think that moving forward, it's kind of a sink or swim in this regard. And I think that this might force a positive out of the negative. It's that people are going to have to start working with each other if they want to create an alternative database that is functional and works well. It's like there's a lot of people that probably have backgrounds in web design or content design and things like that. And out of all of the people who might consider themselves in the truther arena, whether they're just a viewer or a creator, if we were able to pool all those people together and support a certain thing growing or invest in something, I bet we could create a lot of awesome things, but this is going to force people to realize that maybe some of the people that we were accusing others of being shills or controlled agents or whatever,
Right.
perhaps some of them getting kicked off, that's an indicator. Again, I don't really buy this whole, they're just going along and pretending to get censored thing. Maybe that's happening here or there, but I think it's more valuable to try to fear porn the truth of the world into thinking there are shills everywhere. It's kind of like the idea of nukes. I'm in the camp that I don't think they exist based on what we've been told. And what's easier, to create the idea of something to control people or actually have to create it? And
Right.
so this is what I wonder about a lot of the controlled opposition disinfo agent crap. And I think that maybe this is an opportunity to maybe see that some of the people, we might not agree with them, maybe like that channel, they're too pro-Trump for our liking, but there's still a common ground that we can all form on, that we don't want to be censored, and at least, a certain level that we can deal with, that we can say what we want. And then that we all agree that there's a controlling system, that these events that we're being told are not what the media tells us, and that there's an organized esoteric agenda to control humanity, the New World Order, just the basic idea of that. We can all kind of unite on that. But if we can't see past, somebody might be a little bit too Christian for our taste, or not Christian enough for us, or whatever, if we can't get past all that crap, then we're going to be completely fucked. So if this can force people to unite on something a little bit better and at least tolerate more of those differences, I think that some cool things can come of it.
Yeah, we need to have a big intent, right? How they would say it. And I agree. I think you have to have a common objective, but you have to accept the fact that to get to that common goal line or that objective, you're going to have different viewpoints and different positions on how to get there. But if you can coalesce and work together, and collaborate more, then you have those resources. You'll be able to get to that goal line perhaps a little quicker. But I agree with you, Michael. I was never one to be so narrow-minded. Like if you believe this, like on my blog as an example, I put stuff up there that has to do with Christians will do research, and I'm not a Christian, but the fact that they are, and they introduce their religion into the video, as long as it's not over the top. I'm okay with that, because it's really what I'm interested in is, what are you showing us, your research, and where is it leading? And if I think that that's good stuff at the end of the day, by the end of the clip, that it comes together, then that's fair game. Then that will go up on the blog,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. To wrap it up, I think it's just a thing of percentages. If I look at somebody's stuff and I feel like 60 to 70% of it resonates with me, even like 50-55%, there's value there. But then when there's people where like I can't bear to watch more than a minute of their video because they're going off and going over the top, then I just don't watch them. I don't have a problem with them existing, of course not, but those aren't the people that I want to work with. And I think that we kind of have to, some of the people everybody wants to be this island that doesn't want to trade with the other islands,
Right.
Or they will, and then some conflict happens, and then they use that as a reason to completely disavow them, And I think that we need to have a little bit more understanding and forgiveness of those things. But you can speak up for like, I don't agree with you. You know what? Even I actually think that your viewpoint on this is kind of silly. You can say that. That's fine. But to disown them as a human and that they have no value in this community, that's the extreme that I think that these occultists that are running this, they count on that.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
so now it's a time to man up, so to speak. So thanks for coming on and talking about this. And we'll see what happens. But for people that on my channel that don't know who you are, you just want to leave us with where to find you, other than YouTube.
Yeah, all they need to do, go to my hub website. It's Sage of Quay, SAGEOFQUAY, sageofquay.com. And if you just go to my hub website, you'll find my YouTube channel, my DTube, Mixcloud, my blog, Google+, all of the different outlets and media that I have where I get my guests, their material out through my podcasts. And also my music site is there. So
oh yeah, you just had a new album come out, so everyone go check that out. Yeah, I'll put all that in the description. But thanks again, Mike, for coming on, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you.